Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. And I just wanted to introduce again Stephanie Page Weeder. Stephanie, thank you so much for coming out and talking to us about making holidays inclusive for all children.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Hi, everyone. And thank you for the lovely introduction earlier. So, so this topic can be a little bit of a hot button topic. So, what I want to say is that let's just say this is a safe space. When anyone speaks here, we can say, "Oh, I respect your point of view. I may not agree with it, but I respect it." So let's just set that as some ground rules. I'm sure it won't get to that, but lots of people have different feelings about this topic. In any case, you're going to learn today why I feel so passionate about this topic and do this work. Um, uh, as Stephanie mentioned, I've been in early childhood since 1992, and I have a 5-year-old daughter. So I'm living it. So, all right. So before we begin, and we're going to be interactive already, I wanted to start by asking you, why did you go into early childhood education? And if you don't mind coming off mute or putting your responses in the chat, that would be great. So I'm just going to give everyone a couple minutes. Why do you do this work?
And I can answer too while we're waiting for people if they're putting things in the chat. I got into this field, I kind of fell into it. I kind of fell into it. It started as a part-time job that I did when I was in high school, and I just wanted to continue. So I continued on with my education and tried different things and always came back to early childhood. And I love it.
Why did you always keep coming back to it, do you think?
I think that I think that I just had that was my purpose. I think that's me. That's what I'm supposed to do. And the more I went to trainings and the more I got my education, the more I realized just how important it is. These early years are so important for human beings in general and for our society.
Yeah, they sure are. Yeah, so you came into the field by accident and you stayed to make a difference during this really impactful age range. And we have, if you see me looking to the side, it's because I have my chat on my other screen. So forgive me. So I'm looking at some of the chat responses here. Um, so we have someone saying they love making a difference in children's lives. They love kids. Another one saying little kids never lose their sense of wonder and they are so caring to others. We have a lot to learn from them. Another one says, love infants. Oh, aren't they sweet? I've been in this field since 1995 in high school, took a break to raise my girls. I tried a desk job and hated it. I'm very picky on what age group you have, right? So you like a certain age group. I adore children. I love to watch them grow and thrive in childcare. Children of all ages, mostly early years, need as much interaction as I can give to help children reach their full potential, to be a constant in their lives. Another person who fell into it but never left because she just loves going to work every day. And it was the first job after being a stay-at-home mom for 8 years. Oh, work at the preschool that the three kiddos all attended. That must be a very special connection to that place. So, a thread here that I'm seeing is that you love children, you love helping children, you feel that this field has a purpose. So, this is sort of a rhetorical question, but did you go into the field to help some kids, or did you go into the field to help all kids? Now, of course, everyone's going to say, we want to help all the kids we work with, not just some of them. We want to help all of them thrive. If we are not thoughtful in our approach to holidays, though, we can unintentionally help some children thrive while leaving others behind, or worse, even harming them. So, in this session, we're going to try to answer the question, as educators, how can we nurture all children in our care from the start so they can embrace their identities and love themselves? So, I'm going to start by sharing why this topic of making holidays inclusive for all children is so important to me on a personal level, in addition to it being important to me professionally. So, another question for the chat. For those of you who grew up celebrating Christmas, how old were you when you stopped believing in Santa? This is when you stopped being a believer.
Never.
Never is a perfectly acceptable answer. So feel free to come off mute and say it or put your answer in the chat.
I don't remember when I stopped believing in Santa, but I do know when I stopped believing in the Tooth Fairy. But I'm sure I was probably 7 or 8 years old.
Okay.
Probably 8 when my father remarried for the third time.
Oh, wow. That's a lot to unpack. Yeah. We're going to stick to the Santa part for now, but that sounds like it was challenging. Um, oh gosh, so we've got, by the way, I missed someone who responded with a super sweet answer about why they're in early childhood education, which is always love taking care of children and cannot have my own. So this is special to me. Thank you for doing that. It's really lovely. Okay, we have a wide age range here. 14, woo, 14. That's definitely the oldest I've ever heard in these trainings, and I love it. You were my people. You'll hear why in a minute. Some younger ones at age 6, 7, 11, 13. Someone who's just not going to tell their kids. They're going to find out when they go to college or something like that. Okay. So I started believing in Santa, and I mean really, really believing in Santa when I was 12. I had delayed Santa syndrome. Why? How did this happen? Why did I start believing in Santa right as other children, except my buddy, who was it? My buddy Donna. My buddy Donna and I were still believing. Everyone else was done, you know? So why? Why? I don't know about you, Donna, but I can tell you why I only started believing at that age. You probably believed the whole time. I think it started when my family moved. We moved to a town in Massachusetts that was predominantly white and Christian. It was the 80s. My family is also white, but we were Jewish. I transferred there in second grade that year, and every year after, my teacher asked me to stand up and explain Hanukkah to the class. Now, I was desperately trying to fit in with this group. And to this day, I remember the mortification I felt in that moment, how a spotlight was shined directly on my difference. And like I said, this happened every year after year. So it was around that time that I also heard other kids referring to my beautiful, kind mom as a witch because she has a bump on the bridge of her nose, which I inherited, which is common among Ashkenazi Jewish people, Jewish people who come from Europe. I began to suspect there was something fundamentally yucky about my family and me. It was just a feeling, you know, those feelings you have inside as a kid. So here I am, young me, in middle school. I ran for student government, and another student vandalized my campaign signs with swastikas. So here, my belief that maybe there's something wrong with me is getting cemented. Later that year, a boy on the school bus noticed my plastic heart-shaped earrings and said, "Jap, why are you wearing plastic earrings?" Now, I don't know if you know what that means, but JAP stands for Jewish American Princess, and there's the assumption that all Jewish people are loaded with tons of money and dripping with diamonds. And so he's like, "Why are you wearing plastic instead of diamonds, you 12-year-old kid?" But it really stung. And all I had done was walk onto the school bus wearing the same kinds of earrings as anyone else. So in this picture, I am wearing plastic earrings, as was my habit at that age. So despite my regular attendance at our local synagogue, it wasn't long before I was an adolescent spending my allowance on Christmas decorations for my bedroom. I bought a small plastic Christmas tree. I made ornaments for it with molding clay. I shellacked them with clear nail polish. I decorated our hallway banister with silver garlands from CVS. And my mom told me I needed to take it down. I was allowed to keep the tree in my room, but I had to take the stuff down from the hallway. I tried hanging dreidels from it with paper clips to appease her, and she said, "No, no, Jews don't decorate for Christmas." Now, I longed for every fiber of my being to be able to celebrate Christmas. So even though my family's Jewish traditions were warm and meaningful, there was nothing my parents could do to counterbalance the message I was receiving over and over at school. You are different. Your identity is not okay. There is something fundamentally wrong with you and your family. Now, what I experienced was only a fraction of what children of color experienced and still experience, or children whose families wear identifying religious garments here, like hijab, that are sort of non-Christian, basically. And in case you don't know, hijab is the head covering that some Muslim women wear, and here you can see a girl wearing it as well. Now, so many children do not need a teacher to call it out for other kids to know that they're not from the dominant culture. So, and dominant culture, by the way, is a term we're going to come back to in a little bit. So, fast forward 30 years to 2019, I was pregnant with my daughter and I toured preschool programs in southern New Hampshire where I live. And what I found, quite honestly, made me panic. And now, given my history, I think you'll see why. It was a Christmas explosion. It was December. Now, don't get me wrong, I have absolutely nothing against Christmas. As I hope I've made clear, I love Christmas. What I'm trying to illustrate, though, is the impact that elevating the dominant culture in schools has on kids who are not a part of it. Now, I'm going to, like I said, revisit dominant culture in a few minutes. Here are a few examples of what I experienced in New Hampshire. I visited a non-denominational progressive school that continues through elementary and high school, actually. It was a program that really wants to attract a diverse student population, but they didn't realize how much they were accidentally preventing this from happening. So when I entered, I was greeted by a massive Christmas tree in the foyer. And in the infant room, this was the thing that really kind of was the kicker for me. Each child had a Christmas stocking on the wall of the classroom with their name on it. And I asked, well, what happens if you have a student who doesn't celebrate Christmas? And the person paused and was like, I don't know. We've never had a student who doesn't celebrate Christmas. So, I mean, and you're not gonna if you keep having Christmas stockings in your room, but we'll get back to that. So online, I saw posts in local Facebook parent groups about children writing letters to Santa in public school classrooms in southern New Hampshire. And some teachers were using and still use Elf on the Shelf as a behavior management strategy in public school classrooms in the winter months. So what happened there was that these educators fell into a common assumption, which is that widely commercial holidays are universal. So Christmas and Easter are prime examples of holidays that are often assumed to be universal, not necessarily religious or just American. Now, I am going to wager a guess that all of you are familiar with NAEYC, the National Association for the Education of Young Children, right? Our sort of like huge, big, respected, overseeing body of our profession. So their code of ethics states that assuming holidays are universal actually does not respect cultural and religious diversity. Instead, it lifts up one group's holidays above the others. Because regardless of how commercially advertised or widespread these seemingly, I'm reading their blurb, seemingly secular approaches may be, they are grounded in specific religious and cultural assumptions. So does that make sense? So, for example, within many Jewish or Muslim families, Christmas trees and decorations are specifically not used at home, like what my mom didn't want happening, so as to preserve their religious identity. Many times these are religious groups who have been persecuted, and so it's really important for them to try to help their children preserve that identity so that their people don't just evaporate and get completely assimilated. So families who are not Christian may prefer that their children not participate in Christmas and Easter activities because of the huge amount of attention that these holidays already get outside of school, and which make their own family's customs seem less appealing to kids. I mean, let's face it, Santa's pretty awesome. We don't have that in other faiths. Not that we can't go visit Santa somewhere else, but in a classroom where we have to be, we'll talk about that. So there are other holidays this applies to, which really are truly secular, like Mother's Day and Father's Day, which we so often see acknowledged in early childhood settings, which can be okay as long as they're not excluding anyone. Some of your students may have a single parent, come from a home with 2 moms or 2 dads, live with grandparents, and so on. Certainly in a public school setting, you just don't know who you're going to get. So these are delicate issues that families may not feel comfortable bringing to your attention or discussing freely, particularly people from these religions or cultures that have been taught to like stay quiet, don't be detected, stay safe. That's why it is so important for programs to offer neutral ground. We're going to talk about what that can look like. So in 2019, when I saw what was happening in these local programs during the winter time, I decided to pursue grant funding so that I could bring professional development to educators in New Hampshire about the importance of anti-bias education. Thanks to a series of grants, I was able to provide workshops on diverse and inclusive books with some colleagues of mine. And last year, I also created a comprehensive written guide to help early childhood educators make holidays as inclusive as possible for children and families in our community. And I've been providing free workshops like this one based on this guide. So at the end, I'm going to put the link to this in the chat. If possible, maybe in the follow-up email, Stephanie could do that. So that's the basis for these things I'm going to be telling you, and I'm happy to share that with you today. So what I'm going to be discussing with you today is how making your program or classroom welcoming and supportive to people from all backgrounds, it actually supports children's and families' wellness, their well-being, and therefore it impacts our economy, you know, the whole economy of our state. So no pressure. All right. So back to this concept of dominant culture, and let me just go see if I've missed anything in the chat here so far. No, all good. All right, so dominant culture. This is a concept that's important for us to think about as we do this work of helping all families and children feel welcome. So please write in the chat or come off mute because I want to know what part of the state do you live in and how would you describe the dominant culture in the community where you teach or work? So for instance, you know, is it predominantly Latino? Is it predominantly white? Is it predominantly, you know, Muslim? So go ahead and put that in the chat. And I'm also just really curious to see where everyone here is from within New Hampshire. And Katie, if you don't mind, just Katie and Donna, don't if you don't mind, add where you work also, so I get a sense of where that is. Great. So we've got Manchester, which is pretty similar to Nashua, where I live, where Nadine says it's predominantly white, but still a variety, so still some diversity. Goffstown has mainly white with some Asian and Latino mixed in. Lakes region, Rochester, predominantly white and affluent in Amherst. Mandy, I'm glad you mentioned that because socioeconomic income is a form of diversity that's really important to acknowledge as well. Franklin, Bow conquered white. Okay. We are mostly, I think that's supposed to say white, but a handful of other nationalities. Londonderry, Derry. Okay. All right. Hampton Falls, more white. Okay. Yeah. So all of this makes sense to me. Different regions look different in our state. I'm going to share some interesting facts for you, some census data about the state of New Hampshire. Now, the data is collected in blocks of time. So the numbers I had when I wrote this report are from 2016 to 2020. So at that time, just over 10% of the population in New Hampshire was Black, Indigenous, and persons of color, or BIPOC, as an acronym, and just under 90% of the population was white. But, so mostly white, 16 to 18% of children under 18 are BIPOC and or Hispanic. So what that means is that children under 18 represent a much more diverse group than older populations by just about double. Data from the Census Bureau also indicates that diversity in New Hampshire has been increasing pretty rapidly over time, and that diversity is represented in every single New Hampshire county. So it's not just like, oh, the cities are diverse and, you know, everyone, you know, yes, primarily, you know, white, but there's still diversity there. Interestingly, and I'm curious if you know this, New Hampshire is the least religious state in the United States. Did you know that? So 40% of the adult population is unaffiliated or secular. A bigger chunk of the population, though, 55%, identifies as Christian. So this data tells us that in New Hampshire, the dominant culture refers to people who are white and agnostic or Christian. It also tells us that every part of New Hampshire has children and families who are not members of the dominant culture. So the curriculum guide that you'll have access to includes these statistics and many more, including statistics about other types of diversity. And so making sure your program is welcoming and supportive to people from all these backgrounds is what we're going to talk about. Now, before we move forward, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge all the work that you already do to help children and families feel welcome. So please share with me, share with all of us, what are some things that you do or that your program does to help children and families from all backgrounds feel welcome? Go ahead and put that in the chat. Now we have a response here that got me really excited. My eyebrows shot up. Nadine said family questionnaire. Oh, also stay in plays, family fun days. These are awesome. Nadine, if you have a chance to come off mute and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, please let me know, or put in the chat. Can you let us know the kinds of questions you include on your family questionnaire that help you make your program inclusive? Oh, that's so sweet. Grandparent story hours at each month at another center. Love that. Ah, oh, you guys, I'm very happy and excited about these answers. We asked parents to share what holidays they celebrate and more specifically, what are their favorite traditions? Yay. Another one celebrates many different holidays, but they have quite a few families from Brazil and who speak Arabic. So at the very first meeting, they invite them in to see the center and tour while the children are there. And they proceed to communicate with them before the kids enroll. And once they enroll, they invite them to many events throughout the year. That sounds so welcoming. That's great. Yeah. So, okay, thank you for sharing those things. Oh, Nadine saying in her questionnaire that you ask about family traditions, cultural beliefs, who lives in the house. You could be doing this webinar. Okay, we do a communication notebook, which has photos of the children, goes back and forth. That's such a great way to open communication. I don't think the welcoming has anything to do with ethnicity, but there's information asked about child's likes and dislikes before school starts. Oh, it's okay. It's okay. You're great. And I'll take the webinar this time. You can do it next time, Nadine, okay? So, but thanks for sharing that info. So, oops, sorry, my computer's not responding. All right. So I know, and some of you guys are doing excellent best practice here. But I really think that all educators have the best intentions when it comes to celebrating holidays and early childhood programs. And usually the intention is to have fun. And having fun is an important part of preschool. But on the flip side, we don't want the fun to harm anyone, right? So there is no one right way to approach holidays, unless you're an explicitly a religious affiliated program. So if you're like a church preschool and you're a Christian preschool, or you're a Jewish preschool, and like by all means, that is your purpose. Families know when they're coming to your center that they're signing up for that religious orientation. But if you are not a religiously affiliated program, then I'm sorry to say there are some wrong ways to go about sort of just acknowledging the holidays. And the reason they're wrong is that they will either make some children feel like they're less important, and they might make other children feel like they live in a bubble, not even realizing that there are lots of traditions outside their own. So I'm going to come back to these really fabulous ways that you guys engage families, because that's a key way to build in equity into the way you're handling holidays in your program. But before then, I'm just going to talk to you about some of the reasons why, even with the best of intentions, we might not respect family diversity, because it can be subtle. So in order to help all kids grow and thrive when it comes to acknowledging holidays, here's the NAEYC Code of Ethics again, the NAEYC Code of Ethics. It states that respecting family diversity is an essential component of a quality early childhood program. And it means recognizing that everyone has the right to their own traditions, which I think we can all agree to. But here's the tricky one, that a program does not favor one category of families over another. And again, I know no one has any intention of favoring one over another. In fact, some educators even say, although I think they used to say it a lot more, is like, I don't see color, or all children are equal, you know, or we're all a rainbow, we're all the same, you know? And it can be tempting to try to treat all children equally by taking the stance of insisting, you know, we're all the same. And in fact, a whole generation was taught to do this. But the problem with this approach is that it erases children's individuality, and it also leaves way too much room for our unconscious biases to take over our lesson planning. So another word for unconscious bias is implicit bias. And maybe you've heard of implicit bias. And if you have, go ahead and say so in the chat. Now, the thing about this is implicit bias is not bad. It just is. So every single person in the world has bias. Minorities have bias. It takes a lifetime of work to even understand what your unconscious biases are, because they're unconscious. It's natural for us to perceive the world from our own point of view, which has been informed by our own unique identities and experiences. But the essential place to start, if you are dedicated to ensuring an equitable education for all of your students, is to accept that you too have bias, just like I do. And one of the most important things you need to do is be open to discovering what those biases are. So we're going to take a little poll here. And this is the poll about what age researchers are able to detect that we have biases, Steph. So I'm going to give her a moment to pop that up.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I give you the right one. So let's see. No, that's not it. Wrong one. Sorry about that. Stop sharing. Stop sharing. All right, here we go.
You didn't see it.
Wait, no one saw it. No one saw it. Here it is. Here it is.
Here's the poll. At what age do you think researchers are able to detect that we have biases towards or against certain people? And the choices are 0 to 12 months old, 2 to 3 years old, 4 to 5 years old, or older than 6 years old. And the results are coming in.
Fast.
Tight race. Man, you guys are sharp cookies here. Okay. It's not a quiz, I swear. Take an educated guess.
We're just waiting for 2 more people.
Okay. All right. No pressure. I know it's a busy time of day, so if you're multitasking, you can't do it, it's okay.
If you want, I can end it. And if people didn't get a chance, there's 2 more people that didn't get a chance. They can always put it in the chat.
Someone is doing something amazing. They are drawing on the screen. Did you
How? How do you do that?
Nancy O'Leary, it was you. How did you do it?
What? Oh my gosh.
Look at that. Do you see that? The yellow lines?
I do. I need to see.
I mean, that's so cool. So guys, feel free to draw.
God.
Feel free to draw on my presentation. It's good. Okay, yeah. So let's take a look at the results.
Hold on, let me see if I can erase it. No.
That's okay. I don't think I'm doing the next one, and even if it is, it's fine.
Okay.
It's okay, Nancy. So am I. We all are. So, all right. Are you showing their results yet?
I am. Can you see
Oh,
it?
sorry. I'm so sorry. Mine shows the whole thing the whole time, so I didn't realize that. So, okay. So as you guys can see, we have the majority of people thinking that researchers can detect bias at 2 to 3 years old. And indeed, that is what researchers thought until about 2 years ago. Some people, 13%, are saying 4 to 5 years old, which is another good guess. And 25% of you are saying 0 to 12 months old. So I'm going to stop sharing this.
Oops.
Um,
Sorry about that.
yeah, can you make it go away?
Did I make it go away? It's gone, right?
Oh, here, I'm gonna try clicking it out.
Thank
Gone.
you. Okay,
Okay.
good.
Okay. So the answer, ta-da, if my slides will progress, 6 months old. So a study from within the last 2 years from the University of Toronto demonstrated that babies as young as 6 months old show a preference towards individuals that match the race of their primary caregiver. And that makes sense, right? Because their caregiver is familiar and hopefully safe. So it's natural that they would develop a preference. So we have these innate preferences that begin when we're teeny tiny and continue to build throughout our lives. But how do we know which groups we are unintentionally favoring over others? And so I want to say that an implicit bias is different from a stereotype or from intentional discrimination. So it's, if you're like, I hate men and you know it, then, that's not what implicit bias is. Implicit bias is like you actually don't even realize you feel this way, but it's controlling your behaviors to some degree. So there's a tool called the Implicit Bias Questionnaire. There's this program out of Harvard called Project Implicit. You can take these free online questionnaires. They take like 10 to 15 minutes each. They are so cool. The link, you know what? All you have to do is Google Project Implicit. The link is in the curriculum guide if you want that. And if you don't want that, I'll find the link to give you at the end. But this is a really fun thing to do on your professional development. I mean, fun's kind of a weird word. It's a really insightful thing to do on your professional development days with your colleagues. You can take these and you can choose from questionnaires about race, religion, sexual orientation, disability, body size, tons of stuff. And they can help you understand where you might have some unconscious biases to consider. So, I took them and I was surprised at some of the results that I got. Now, what you need to know is that once you figure out what your internal implicit bias is that you actually have to actively counteract those unconscious biases because they've been programmed into you for your entire life. So what if your student body isn't diverse? You really think it's not diverse? Oh, thanks, Stephanie, for putting that link in the chat. So if you really do have a homogenous group of families, as you might in some parts of New Hampshire, you might wonder if any of this applies to your program. And so I'd like to share this graphic from the children's book publishing industry to illustrate why an inclusive approach to holidays definitely applies to kids in a non-diverse program. And I'm going to go to the next slide and you'll see that this is from 2018. So I come from the children's book publishing industry. Things have been changing a lot since 2018, although still not great. But here's how it stood in 2018. So this graphic shows the proportion of children's picture books with main characters of various identities. So for instance, like animals or American Indian, First Nation, you can see that. And so that represents the main character. So what do you notice about this image? Go ahead and come off mute or put it in the chat.
If I can say, I think it's amazing that, and this is all in the United States, correct?
It's a great question.
I imagine it is because
No.
it's from the University of Wisconsin, Madison, right? So anyways, if it is just from the United States, it's crazy to me because even though we're like a lot of us, it's a huge white population here. If you go like to other states, it's like if you go down south, for example, it's completely different.
For
So
sure.
the fact that it's still a lot of children's books in 2018
Oh
still
yeah.
had 50% were 50% showed 50% white children or white people, for example, is amazing to me. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, to answer your question a little more thoroughly, I'm not sure about this, but most most books that we might see in this country, you know, so publishing houses that distribute books widely, they're pretty big and they may have offices in different parts of the world. So, and then the books get translated into lots of different languages. So, you know, sometimes the books everywhere are actually fairly similar. Happy and Proud Little White Boy. Oops, I'm sorry, I accidentally, my mouse went wild. Happy and Proud Little White Boy. Yeah, so let's take a look at that boy. So he looks really happy, and look what's all around him. He's got all of these mirrors. So he's seeing himself in the books he reads many times over. You know, half the books he reads, me, right? Very validating. He is important, you know? Now, these children and animals to the left of him have fewer mirrors reflecting their realities. Um, they have singular or incomplete ways of viewing themselves reflected in books or their communities and their possibilities. They're at risk of feeling less important and less normal than that boy all the way there on the right. And notice that animals got way more real estate than kids of color. What the heck? So I have another, the white child seems blissfully unaware. Exactly. So that's the danger, right? What happens when you wind up with a population of adults who are unaware of a really rapidly growing other part of the population? So we're doing them a disservice as educators if we don't, you know, include some of that diversity. So I have another question for you. This is kind of just an analogy. So if you do something in your program that acknowledges children's birthdays, do you do the same thing for all the kids or do you do something different for some of the kids? So just come off mute or let me know in the chat. Like everyone gets the same treatment or some people get different things.
Everybody gets a birthday cake, but their birthday cakes are for each kid.
Mhm.
It all depends on what they're into.
Okay, but they all get a cake.
Yes,
Great.
they do.
Everyone
And a
gets it.
gift.
Okay. Okay, we do the same unless everyone requests different or don't celebrate. Okay, so basically you guys are, everyone's getting the same thing. So imagine this. This is not real, but imagine this. In Miss Claire's class for their birthday, all the kids get their name on a wall calendar. Yay, marking their birthday. Now, kids with October through December birthdays also get a paper crown and a cake. Kids with January through August birthdays get all of this plus a bouncy house. Now, of course, in this situation, children will compare how their birthdays are treated. The kids who get the bouncy house, they're like that white boy in the children's book publishing graphic. Miss Claire is telling them, you are more important. These children are at risk for not developing empathy because it's all about them. And empathy is not just nice to have. You might be familiar with research shows that empathy and emotional regulation are more indicative of lifetime success than IQ. So, what about those one or two kids with a September birthday who only get their name on the bulletin board? How will they feel when they see the other kids getting a cake or a crown or even getting a bouncy house? What story will they tell themselves about their self-worth? So children have no control over the month in which they're born, making this classroom's practice obviously profoundly unfair and damaging. But unfortunately, this is exactly what happens when we unintentionally highlight certain customs and holidays more than others. And I'd argue that if there are only a few or one or two kids in a group that are from a minority group, it's even more important to show that they matter just as much as the majority. You may have heard of the expression windows and mirrors. It was coined by someone called Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop. She was a distinguished scholar of children's literature. And what windows and mirrors means is that children can both learn about others and see themselves reflected in the books we read them. So she was referring to children's literature. Our educational settings, our classrooms, can also be windows and mirrors when it comes to celebrating the holidays. And so, as I mentioned, I know that we all have the best of intentions. We want to have fun with holidays, but becoming aware of common pitfalls when it comes to holidays can really help you improve your practice. So I'm going to quickly point out some traps and tricky places. And if you do some of these things, please do not feel bad. That is not the intention here. Again, it's not about being right or wrong or good or bad. It's about growth. My hope is that you'll just take the information and reflect on it. And then after this, we're going to get into our solutions. Some of you are already doing them quite well. So, of course, in your early childhood classroom, you want to offer hands-on activities. That's how kids learn best. But it is best to not plan hands-on activities or crafts based on holidays that are not extremely familiar to you, unless you're able to get input for someone from that culture. Like, for instance, unless you're able to get a family to come in and do that, a family who celebrates that holiday. Because despite your good intentions, it can be easy to accidentally tokenize sacred cultural symbols or objects, which means that we're accidentally treating them with disrespect by using them as the basis of an art project or just getting the details wrong. So partaking in a tradition that's not your own can also be interpreted as what's called appropriation, which means trying out a tradition in a superficial fashion that might actually feel strange or offensive to those people from that culture. Taking a look at this photo, what are your thoughts? What's potentially problematic about what's going on here?
Well, could I say something, if you don't mind, Stephanie? I love how sensitive that you're being about this subject because, like you said at the beginning, this can be a touchy subject for people. People can feel defensive. They can feel just upset, right, about all this. But the way you're talking about it, to me, is so sensitive because you're saying it's implicit. You don't know, like what you talked about yourself growing up and stuff. Obviously, those kids were cruel, and maybe the adults in their lives, I mean, I'm hopefully the adults in their lives, at least some of them, they didn't know that they were perpetuating something. They didn't know. So I didn't know. I used to celebrate, with what you're looking at on the screen. I used to celebrate that when I was teaching a long time ago. And it wasn't until I was open to learning about other things that I realized that it probably wasn't the best idea for anybody, really.
Oh, for sure. I look back on some of the stuff I did and I'm like, oh, I definitely would not definitely would not do that now. So, I mean, no question. And again, it's just, everyone's in their own personal evolution as a teacher. And this really, from my perspective, is not political at all. It's about meeting children where they are and helping them grow and creating an environment that's super safe for them, which is what we want to do. So I have a few comments here. Oh, they have some celebrations of different. You know what? I'm gonna Katie, I'm gonna hold that comment and I want to come back to it. So if I forget, please remind me. All right. So, all right. So just looking at this picture, so problematic. I don't see any comments about it, but so these are stereotypes of Indigenous people wearing headdresses. They all look the same. There's a teepee in the background. It is unclear, but I think very unlikely that these kids are from that culture, because if they were, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be doing this. So it's perpetuating a stereotype, and it's unclear kind of like what's the meaning? You know, what are they learning from this? What's going on here? So someone from Native American culture might see this and say, what exactly are you doing? Now, another thing that can accidentally happen when we create crafts or like celebrate holidays that aren't our own in programs is we're not sensitive to the fact that every culture has rich diversity within it. So different regions and even different families observe holidays differently. And so for that reason, it's not, we're not really in a position to make blanket statements or crafts about how any group of people observes holidays. So for instance, this is a picture of a celebration called Holi, which takes place in India and other parts of Southeast Asia. My daughter's teacher told me last year, because her school had a Holi party, which was thrown by a family and a teacher whose cultures celebrate Holi. Now, what was interesting is the teacher and the parent are from different regions of India, and they were telling me that it's celebrated differently in different regions. Now, I mean, I, first of all, didn't even know what this holiday was, and I certainly didn't know that. So if I, as an educator, had tried to say, oh, let's do Holi, it's super fun in my classroom, I mean, guaranteed I would have gotten it wrong and ignored some of the nuances there. So for instance, you may know that a child in your class is from India, but which region, right? So this is where it's really great you guys are inviting your families in, because they will do what's authentic for them. And that is really how we learn about differences. So some programs try to celebrate all the holidays to make things equal, like they do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And it's so well intended, but it's super tricky, because even within cultures, some holidays are more important than others. And it's super difficult to understand this unless you've done really careful research or have had conversations with people from various cultures, and none of us have time to be anthropologists. So when you're taking this approach, it's really super important to monitor how much attention you give to each holiday. So for instance, if you have a visit from Santa to your school and you don't want to let that go, you have to find something equally exciting for every other holiday you celebrate, or else you're elevating Christmas above the other holidays. So most programs find this impossible, and they wind up favoring some holidays over the others. Don't worry, we'll get back to what you can do. In the United States, December is often considered a holiday month. It's because of Christmas. Judaism does not have a super important holiday in December. Hanukkah is actually a relatively unimportant holiday in Judaism, but it's been elevated just to make Jewish kids feel better about Christmas. Muslims often do not have a holiday in the winter. They operate on a rotating calendar, so their holidays fall at different times of year, and the curriculum guide actually gives information about Muslim holidays in their calendar, so you can learn about that. For families who don't observe any significant holidays in December, having a December holiday party or holiday concert is potentially alienating, but there's an easy fix. You can just say, you know, it's a winter concert or a winter party. So these are just subtle differences that really can make a family feel more or less welcome. And finally, there are some holidays that are problematic because they just ignore the fact that they were really oppressive or harmful to other people. So here again, we've got some Thanksgiving paraphernalia. And so Thanksgiving and Columbus Day, or which we just had, which has been renamed Indigenous Peoples Day in some places, traditionally those holidays have been taught in ways that leave out really important information. Thanksgiving is still widely acknowledged in preschool in a very simplistic way. For instance, with like paper turkeys. Again, if you do this, not bad. We are in America. It's an American holiday. The problem is that for Native American people, and let's say you have a Native American family in your class, or you just want people to respect Native Americans, your kids too, then it's not nice to simplify the holiday into a paper turkey, because it completely ignores the fact that the holiday is celebrating wiping out a whole group of people. Instead, there are lots of great things about the tradition of Thanksgiving that we can celebrate with our kids, like harvest and gratitude and some of those underlying themes that really help make the activities that you're doing more educational. Okay, so tons of potential pitfalls. A lot of people start to feel kind of weird and uncomfortable during that part, maybe a bit defensive. What do you do? And again, there's no one right answer, but I do have some suggestions for creating a culture of inclusivity. And this is just, again, a reminder that growth as an educator means just repeatedly asking yourself how your practice is impacting the children in your care. It applies to non-religious holidays as well, as I mentioned, like Mother's Day and Father's Day. So you guys have done the number one thing that is important. And so I was going to do a poll, but I'm going to skip it, both for the sake of time and because I think I know the answer for most of you guys. But the poll question was going to be, how much would you say you know about the cultural background and home life of the children in your care? And the choices were a lot, some, and not much. I can already tell from what you've put in the chat that a bunch of you at least know a lot about the kids in your program. And that is the number one thing, is to know your families. So be sure to send home a questionnaire to families like the ones that some of you guys have, that include questions about what holidays the child observes, what languages they hear at home, who they live with, what their family structure looks like, and even what they like to do for fun. Why is this important? Because when you're planning your lessons, any child who feels excluded or like they matter less because of any of the activities you're doing in your program is one child too many. We never want to hurt kids in that way. And so understanding your students' lives outside of school will help you plan inclusive activities. Now, I do want to open up discussion for just a minute, because some people might say, well, if a child doesn't celebrate Christmas or doesn't like, Valentine's Day, they can stay home that day. So especially, in all school, but especially in an early childhood setting, how would you feel about us spending a couple of minutes to talk about your thoughts on that? Is it okay to say kids should stay home? Is it not? What's the best thing here? Perhaps you can hear my young child calling for her dad very loudly.
Hi, this is Michelle. I don't think that children should be asked to stay home because of something you're doing in the classroom, because their parents have, enrolled their child in your classroom, and you need to be, sensitive to their likes and dislikes. I know that I've worked in a center where the teacher didn't celebrate Halloween because of her religious beliefs, and she chose not to come to work. Because they didn't change things in her classroom. But I don't think you should ask children to stay home. It's wrong.
Mm.
And you need to change what you're doing in your classroom.
Mm. Well, we have an interesting case study here in the chat, and thank you for that. Sorry, I missed your name's not showing up because your video is Michelle. Thank you for that. We have a comment in the chat here about an infant who does not celebrate Halloween. We're not asking them to stay home, but we did make them aware we're still reading the books. Okay, so giving the family a heads up, this is what we're doing. Right. Okay. So let's keep moving on through this. And we notify families when they enroll yearly that has all the events and holidays stuff posted. We never ask families to keep their children home. We had Jehovah's Witness students, and the parents were allowed to keep them home if they chose, or they could send them. Instead of a Christmas tree, the child just made an evergreen tree. Instead of Santa, they made their grandpa. Okay. My daughter had a friend who was a Jehovah's Witness, and they didn't celebrate holidays. They kept her home all the time because this school celebrating holidays. I know this child felt excluded and isolated. Yeah. So, I mean, we are so used to certain things as a society. We are so used to it being normal to have a craft of a Christmas tree or have a craft of a Santa or, celebrate holidays in public school. And I think the question we have to ask is why? Why are we doing it when we know there are kids who don't celebrate that, parents who need to go to work, who have to face the choice of missing work or exposing their kid to something that is against their values? Why would we do that as professionals whose mission is to support family and children? Is it because we're so attached to the craft? Can we not replace it with something else? So these are the tough questions we have to ask ourselves. Now, I know some of you guys do this, but inviting families to share their traditions multiple times throughout the year is a fabulous way, one of the very best ways to learn about just the diversity, even within what seems like a pretty homogeneous population. You never know what things people do in their family or what traditions they have. And in the curriculum guide, there's even a template or of a letter or email that you can send to families inviting them to share. Now, some working families might not be able to come in and share, and I really encourage you to work with them. You can, email or on the phone, ask if they can send things in to share that you can share on their behalf. And then, this is key, when families do share, take pictures, share it back out to the whole group of families so they can see what's happening, because that will encourage people, oh, maybe I should too. It seems like lots of other parents are doing this. It will normalize the family sharing. And you can keep it really simple for families. You can even give them a formula like, hey, just like choose a book, and come read it to the class. It can be that simple. So this photo here shows me visiting my daughter's preschool to share about Passover a few years ago. And I read a book, I brought a Seder plate, and I'm trained in this, so I created like some activities for the kids, but that's way beyond what we might expect from parents. So someone said, instead of celebrating Halloween, we had a dramatic play for community people. I love it, such as police officers, firefighters. Oh, what a beautiful idea, Katie. Okay, I'm so excited for you to bring that up again when we get to the next part. And then someone else said, working at preschool, it's shoved in our faces. Halloween outfits started weeks ago, costume talk, etc. Soon will be Santa. Yep, these are deeply ingrained traditions that, for whatever reason, adults are super attached to. So approaching holidays inclusively is, and this is why I'm here, part of a broader social emotional learning curriculum, because it helps children develop love for themselves and respect for others. So the guide that I'm sharing with you includes curriculum ideas for using social emotional learning as a foundation for your inclusive approach to holidays. I mean, truly, holidays and how they're handled cannot be viewed separately from social emotional learning. A really great tip, and this is something you can do to check yourself a little bit, is approach every holiday as an opportunity to learn. Questions like, what is the origin of the holiday? Where in the world do people celebrate it? What are different ways of observing the holiday? So a safe rule of thumb is to plan each activity only after answering the question, what is the educational purpose? So for instance, the turkey craft. What is the educational purpose? Now, yeah, you can say fine motor skills, with the glue and stuff like that. But I mean, really, what's the educational purpose? What are the kids learning that has meaning about that holiday? So let's talk about Halloween for a moment, because it's just about Halloween. So imagine that your school or your classroom loves having an annual Halloween classroom party and parade, but you realize that some families might not celebrate Halloween or be able to send their kids to school in costumes. And this, by the way, is where we get into socioeconomic inclusivity. We just don't know people's situations. Is it hard for a family to afford a costume? I actually mentioned this to someone, and a parent, and they said, you don't need money, you just use eyeliner, make a cat face. Kind of beside the point. Some families kids will compare their costumes. Some families may have illness, neurodivergence. It's hard for them to get it together and send their kid on the right day in a costume, So take this burden off the families. And you can ask yourself, what's the educational purpose of the Halloween party? And so perhaps some of the benefits were kids enjoy dressing up and pretending. The costume parade brings the school community together. Kids learn about pumpkins. They get to eat a special snack that day. They get to make Halloween themed crafts, which is good for creativity and fine motor skills. I guarantee you, as we have in this beautiful example from Katie, that there are ways to accomplish all of these goals without it being specifically about Halloween. Therefore, that poor child whose family does not celebrate Halloween will come to school and feel included because, good Lord, they should. So the curriculum guide will also include units on harvest, as I mentioned, which shares lots of ideas. This is a really wonderful, perfectly appropriate activity of doing a scientific investigation of pumpkins.
Could I say one thing, Stephanie, if that's okay?
Yes, please.
One of the ways I always did holidays until I started working with Jane Marquis at the Adult Learning Center, and and this was when I was older too. It was like 20 years ago, so there was a huge part of my career where I celebrated holidays. And we were talking about how Nadine said it's like it's shoved in kids' faces, whether it's on TV, whether it's out in shopping, it's on the everywhere, whatever holiday it is, especially like Christmas and Halloween. Sometimes it can be very overstimulating for children. And sometimes I didn't realize this, but sometimes it can be very stressful for families around that time if they didn't, and Thanksgiving too, if they didn't get along, they don't get along with their family. It can be very, very stressful during that time for everybody involved. So what we did was we kept holidays out of the classrooms. Mm-hmm. We celebrate, like we did things like you're showing right here. Themes that were, yeah. So, and that helped a lot.
That's wonderful. And that's such a great segue into what I'm going to say next. And actually, who was it who said they're reading the Halloween book and they notified the family? I'm going to come back to that because that actually is okay. Okay. So that's actually probably going to be okay with most families. And I'll tell you why. So to totally piggyback on what you just said, Stephanie, and by the way, I'm just about done because I want to leave time for questions and announcements, but many programs, like you said, avoid cultural holidays altogether and instead come up with universal celebrations that have no particular, conventional holiday affiliation. So with this approach, they are trusting that families will take care of celebrating the holidays that are important to them. An example of this would be having Friendship Day instead of Valentine's Day. I saw someone in the chat with Pajama Day, and that's fine too. Just, be aware that sometimes when you choose something that can, tricky because a kid might accidentally wind up feeling left out. Parents forgot it's pajama day. Great. Now that kid feels excluded. So, we always want to try to do things that make sure kids are feeling included and not left out due to circumstances beyond their control. I did pajama day when I was a teacher, never had any problems, but also the population I was working with, as far as I knew, didn't have these concerns, but in hindsight, maybe they did. I just don't know. So back to books. So, okay, so what if you don't celebrate the holidays in school? Well, we still can't have kids living in a bubble. So we want to expose children to the rich cultural diversity of the world. So we're inviting parents in to share and learning about their holidays, learning about their cultures. They are, authentic experts with lived experience who can share. And we can use books. Books are the way. Not all books. You have to choose good books. I have a whole other webinar on that. So you can even group holidays by theme, like harvest festivals or festivals of light. And because this helps highlight commonalities among different cultures. So even though we're not all the same, we as humans, we do have commonalities with the details being different. It's really important for kids to learn that. So in the curriculum, I have huge book lists. They have been vetted by experts in the field to be culturally sensitive and appropriate. And so you can look at that. They're divided by curriculum unit, by season. So it's a great resource for you. So with this approach, because you're educating about specific holidays using books, the activities will be based on themes of the holidays and not taking tokens from specific holidays. So for instance, let's say take the book in the middle, Harvest Days. Rather than making a craft like from that book in particular, you can do something that sort of celebrates the theme, of nature. Because again, we don't want to accidentally like treat a cultural object or symbol with disrespect. Last thing, not harvest time. That's the last slide. Last thing is your classroom decorations and your program decorations. They send a very strong message about what's important. They send that message to kids. They send it to parents. So rather than decorating the class with symbols typically associated with specific holidays, I recommend using more neutral decor. So for example, rather than putting up the turkeys, for Thanksgiving, consider images from nature, like this lovely bulletin board here that says harvest time. Instead of Christmas trees, decorate with images of snowflakes. And of course, your wall decor might often consist of kids' art projects, and this is why it's really important to consider whether your hands-on activities are inclusive. So it would be impossible for us to know everything about every culture. We are not anthropologists, and we don't have lived experience in every culture. We only have our own experience. So there are going to be plenty of times when you just don't know the answer or something, or you feel unsure. And so we can model for kids and parents and just say, if it's about a tradition or a culture or anything else, I don't know, but I'd like to find out. And then you can show them how you find out. Oh, I'm going to go to the library and get a book on this. I'm going to use the computer and look this up. I'm going to talk to people who I have a friend who celebrates this. I'm going to ask them. I'm going to ask people with lived experience who can provide accurate information. So I hope what you come away with from this is that as an educator, you can choose to amplify or make bigger the messages children are already receiving nearly everywhere else outside of school, or you can choose a different path. You can choose a path that allows children from underrepresented groups to feel like they matter. And this is the same path that nurtures empathy in children from the dominant culture. So you are incredibly influential in the lives of the children of your in the lives of the children in your care. You have enormous power. You're their world away from home. And it's such an amazing thing. So thank you for being so responsible with that power. Thank you for doing what you do and for the incredible influence you're having and for your wonderful attention and participation. And I'm just going to go back through the chat to see if there's anything I missed. In the meantime, here's the resource. When I stop screen sharing, I'm going to put the link to it in the chat. So it includes everything I presented today, plus 11 lesson plans with book recommendations, additional information, professional development exercises, and much more. Share this freely with your colleagues. I want anyone who is teaching kids in New Hampshire to have access to this. I'll put my email in the chat. If you want a printed bound copy, I have grant money for that. Let me know. I'll get that to you. The QR code is if you want to get it on your phone, scan it on your phone. So thank you again. I'm going to stop sharing so we can see each other and so I can put some links in the chat. And I think we have about 10 minutes left. So Stephanie, I'm going to hand it over to you with whatever you want to do for that time.
I just have to say, having you here was a dream. And again, I love the way you, it was almost like you asked us, or you invited us to be curious. You invited us to be curious, right? Because I feel like if we shove things down people's throats, even if it's the best thing for kids ever, people are going to be defensive and they're going to be like, no, That's not what we do here, right? And that includes me. Like, don't tell me what to do. But you didn't do that. You said, "Hey, here's some information for you. This is what I know," right? You also, I thought, were very respectful of the people on the call, and I feel like you really celebrated and heard what they do. And that was another thing. I think that everybody on this call really cares because if they didn't, they wouldn't be on the call.
No one's in it for the money. Nope.
Right, right. And they work all day. They'd be watching TV or reading a book or something. But to come out here
Yeah.
and listen is amazing. I also want to say thank you for letting us record this. I'm going to share this with my colleagues. And I want to we still have about 10 minutes. Thank you, Stephanie. Put the curriculum guide in there. Stephanie, I love that you said if people want a hard copy, if they want a bound copy, I would love to get one of those for childcare wear if possible,
Yes.
because we could share it when we go to programs.
Yeah.
And absolutely, and you shared your email. Thank you so much. I wanted to let people know too. We'll stay on until 7:30, but and people can ask questions. But I wanted to let you know that when you click end, when you get off of this call, a survey will pop up on your screen. And if you could write down some I was going to say, when I was first talking to Stephanie, I was telling her, I'm going to tell everybody, please fill out this evaluation and write some great feedback for Stephanie. And what did you say? You said, well, and not so great feedback too.
Any feedback, always, always looking to improve. So just feedback.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And it was great hearing about all the teachers and what they do every day. We heard some people that were saying that they were a little frustrated because their views of what they would like to do is not the majority view. And you know what? I feel like that's with everything in life, right? Wherever you work, if you don't work by yourself in a basement on computers, and if you have a boss, it's almost like that's just the way it is, right, Stephanie? It's like that's life is trying to compromise and see what your values are. And
how change happens is a little bit at a time. So some people start doing it and then more people doing it and then the tide turns. Think about cigarette smoking, right? So it used to be like everybody and their mother,
yes,
literally. Now, some people do find that's their choice, but we're fully aware of the dangers. So, um, uh, and I just want to share an uplifting thing, and then I'm going to respond to the chat. So that program where I went and saw the Christmas stockings for the infants, since then they have really evolved, and they are I almost confirmed they're going to have me do this training for their entire faculty and staff, and they go from infancy through high school. So, so lovely to see the state evolving in this way, and I'm just really happy how much things have changed within a 5-year period. So we have a question here about Valentine's Day. Yes. Honestly, I wasn't too sure about that either till I started learning about this, but it is it's St. Valentine's Day. It is religiously rooted. It is one of those examples of something that's like so secular, you'd think no one has a problem with it. But there are some families and cultures who do, including, plenty in New Hampshire. So, to be honest, I'm not exactly sure which groups they are. So if anyone here does, please let me know. But like Katie said, we do friendship or sweetheart or someone special, and that's a great substitution. It doesn't have to be Valentine's Day. It could just be around that time of year or a different time of year. You do Friendship Day, and you do friendship things. So I
yeah.
hope
And
that
if I could say too, I like the way that you Nadine said I always just liked it, but I never thought about it too much. I really like the way you said, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Literally, just why, right? Are we doing it because we've always done it? Are we doing it because we feel like if we don't do it, the kids are going to miss out, right? Are we going to, is it, but that's us. We're doing it we're doing it for us. Like I worked at a center that had a Halloween party, and these poor kids were so miserable in these costumes because he had to walk all over the building. But the adults thought it was so cute and they loved it. But then it's like, these poor kids are miserable. It's like, who are we doing it for? We're doing it for the adults, really, right?
Totally. I mean, when it's so, and that can, even as parents, gosh, that's so hard to tease out. Like, am I doing this because it's good for my kid or because I need it? And sometimes it's important to do it. Sometimes it is important to take care of yourself as a teacher, but it should never be at the expense of children's well-being. So there has to be a creative way to get around it. And that's what I'm saying here too, is that there are lots of creative ways for you to have fun in a way that doesn't hurt the kids.
I love that.
Any other questions? I always dislike Valentine's Day too, especially when I was single. Did not like. So lots of reasons to not like Valentine's Day. And actually, when you're married, it's not that great either. So depending, unless you really hit the jackpot. So, any other questions or thoughts? You guys have been so great, and I've really, really enjoyed. I'm so heartened to see some of the things that you guys are doing in your program, and also really heartened to see that you seem to be open to thinking about how to do things differently. So I appreciate you.
Yes, and thank you everybody so much for coming out. Thank you again, Stephanie. This was just a wealth of information, and I love your presentation style. You're very compassionate and you're inclusive. You don't exclude anybody. So I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
And if everybody, when you do leave the call, if you could please fill out the survey that will pop up. And Rebecca said thank you to you. If you could please do the survey that pops up and just let us know what you thought. I'm going to share the feedback anonymously. Well, the survey is anonymous anyways, but I'm going to share the feedback with Stephanie about what you thought about it. And if you had any ideas, any different ideas or anything, she said, share.
Yeah, please. Yeah. Yeah. If you're like, this was the worst night of my life, please let me know. But let me know why so I can improve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm going to stop recording too.